Good morning, ladies and gents. Today, I don't know why I took my hat off, because trust me, the hair I got after showering and then going to bed last night is not great. Not great. It is really not. Good morning, Lemony Fresh. Nice to have you with us. Today we are going to start in on something completely different from what we've been doing lately. Lately, we've been doing gameplay stuff. Gameplay state, mostly traveling and interacting with things in the world, making sure that we have enough code to support all the content that we want to be in place. And that's great, right? We need all that code and content, otherwise the game gets boring very quickly. But one of the things that makes this genre so specifically cool, and what tends to be a big draw factor for a lot of players of the dungeon crawl genre, is that we have this character customization that happens not only at the beginning, but also all throughout the game. Each time your characters level up, they get certain stat boosts, they get certain bonuses. You want to make sure that as they go, that they progress in the way that you want them to. And that's something that's really meaningful for us, because we want to make sure that these characters feel like they're yours as a player. They feel like they are owned by or belong to the player, because that adds, without any extra work, a sense of attachment that might not otherwise come from these characters without any other work, right? Normally we'd have to have dialogue, we'd have to have character text, we'd have to have background for some of these characters. That's not something that we actually need, though, because all the characters that we currently have are going to be generated by the player, and as the player generates them, they instill them with thoughts and ideas and details that are their own, and so they then take ownership of that character without any additional effort on our part, which is fantastic. So you can see I've already started in to some degree. I've already got, and I'm gonna, maybe I shouldn't do that. Well, you know what, I am. Because this main camera should not be using a skybox. We're just gonna go to a solid color. Yeah. And this is going to be, we have the game scene. I'm actually going to, this is the character creation scene. So this is where we're going to do all the menu work to kind of load bits and pieces in. And we're going to have to eventually go back and do a main menu and then be able to do main menu to character to in-game one after another. Not worried about that right now. Those transitions are not something we're going to futz with until we complete at least 2 states. So we need to get that second state in place. Otherwise, this is just going to be a nightmare anyway. So, some things that I want to start with. Just getting a background, I don't actually know if I want a background from the start, but just getting some kind of basic setup that is always there. And then getting our scripts put in place so that we can do all the controls and manipulate them correctly without having a nightmare of code floating around. That's what I'm really hunting for. And we might use a mixture of a very basic Playmaker state machine followed by some custom code sitting inside that system in order to handle our controls. So, let's get started. And this might not be the most exciting thing in the world, but it is definitely something that does need to get done. I've been working on this game for quite some time, and getting to that point where we need character creation is a big step. And I'm very happy that we're finally getting there, because it's not only kind of it was a long ways off, but on top of that, it adds a lot of what's the term? It adds a lot of functionality, or a lot of seeming functionality, for something that, honestly, effort-wise, is little more than just a bunch of UI, right? The effort here, it's going to be more time than effort that we're about to put into this. So that's why I don't really mind doing a lot of time on this UI work, is because it lets me also think about other things I'd like to have going on. For example, and I've got stuff all over my desk. So let's just get some of this out of the way so I can see my notebook. So like starting to think about leveling up would maybe be on the docket while I sit here and do some of this stuff. Because it makes some sense that we're able to not just create characters, but actually, I might actually want to do party creation instead of character creation, come to think of it. Yeah, that'll be nice. That'll be an easy addition that'll add a little bit of challenge to this, I think. Let's do that. We've also got our 4 characters that we want to feature in this I guess I'll feature them in the character creation part. Nice hat. Thank you. It hides my terrible hair right now. I made the mistake of taking a shower, leaving my hair somewhat damp, and then falling asleep in a funny position so that my hair I look like Dr. Frankenstein to some degree. Not the monster, doctor. Let's see. So, I've actually not thought much about how I want this to look. Because I know we have the party screen where we essentially want to be able to say, here are the people you've selected to be in your party. And then we've got the character screen where we actually generate characters. And there's also some level of tutorial that probably needs to go into this, as simple and easy as it should be. So we need to be able to show tooltips, we need to be able to show help markers, and we need to be able to tell the player about stuff like formation. Because while we haven't said it yet, and I haven't talked about it much, it's already implemented, and I think it's something that definitely should find its way into the game. And if this is something I want to be able to distribute to people, I need to be able to explain my game without me sitting here on the other side of a camera talking to you guys. So that's something else we kind of have to keep in the back of our minds as we work on this. Okay, so let's see here. To start with character creation, we need a couple things. One, we need the party assembly. I'm actually thinking I'll save that for another scene. We'll see. One thing at a time. So we have our character creation text, and we also want a bunch of stuff all at once. So we need to... Actually, this can probably be a lot smaller too. There we go. Let's see. So we have character. We have their name, obviously, that you want to be able to pick out. And that should be enough space to kind of get away with this. Gender is going to be an interesting one because, as I said earlier at some point, not all races have gender defined in the same way. Humans obviously will have male and female, and I'm tempted to go down the route of identification instead of biological, but I'm not sure about that yet. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around whether I even want to go down that path, or if that's something that I think is a dark abyss that I could definitely cause myself trouble with. Because as much as I like to make a game, I also don't like to make a giant controversy because I did something stupid because I haven't done my research. Eventually, though, gender or sex, depending on how we, what terminology we're using here, that is something we'll have to think about. Obviously, class is also something that really, really determines starting information quite a bit. Whether or not your character class is something along the lines of, oh, well, this is just a starting point, or is it more than a starting point? I'm kind of tempted to put race, honestly, before gender, because one should affect the other, maybe. I honestly, part of me just doesn't even want to, go down that path. race, class, obviously all the stats we had. I probably should open up my character class so I can see the innards of everything I'm going to need. My character and player character class being kind of the storage mechanisms for all the information here. Kind of makes sense too in a good object-oriented world when you think about how you would store or hold that information. That's kind of the way I'd do it. So we have stats and then we have skills. And we want to take care of stats fairly early on. At least as early on as we can manage. And I'm going to have to go back and rename all these text elements, but for now, I don't care. We're just going to get rid of them like this, handle them that way, and be done. Oh boy, here we go again. Strength, coordination. I need to extend that one slightly. Endurance. And this is kind of the first time when I want to emphasize that this is a kind of a tri-stat system to some degree. Knowledge. Reasoning and oh boy, mental fortitude stat is knowledge, reasoning, and willpower. I think? No, that's not right. Resolve. There we go. I was like, I know this. I should know this, but apparently I don't quite yet. And then, yeah. Social stats. Here's our allure. Here is our charisma. Uh-oh. And it looks like we're kind of out of space. Oh well. I'll keep it off for a moment, and we'll just fix it up in a moment. Grab these three. Let's drag them up a little bit. My only worry right now is that I have absolutely no way to separate the three groups. What I do think I want to do, this might be a way to do it. Let's take an image and see if we can separate them out that way. So specifically, and I have to move the image higher up in the hierarchy so that it gets covered by things instead of covering. Something you have to keep in mind when you work with Unity is that they use the hierarchy for a lot of things, and one of those things that they use it for is for render order. And so we need to make sure that when we do render order stuff that we have things in the hierarchy the right way. Thanks, Kate. I have had the hat for a while. It's not until recently I've decided to start wearing it again. Or yesterday, just for kicks, decided I really liked it. Kind of said, yeah, let's keep doing this. So, hanging on to it, at least for now. It's kind of the old, like, Paperboy style hat, but instead of being the, like, rough, almost hemp material, like a rough cotton material, it's just a more modern... I'm pretty sure it's a nylon. Still, does the trick. Keeps my head warm when the house is frigid. I honestly need to probably just, like, turn up my AC at some point. Or AC, my heater at some point. But all things cost money, and if I can save a couple bucks and put it into the game instead, honestly, that's what I'd rather do. Because I know that I've got another large purchase coming my way for this game in terms of assets. And so I need to make sure that I have the funds for that. How it goes. I have a bunch of dungeon terrain and architecture that I'm waiting on. I'm kind of hoping it goes on sale. I'm really doubting it will go on sale. So I'm just kind of like, well, since it probably isn't, I'll just start saving. And we'll take care of it that way. So I want to try something. I've got these images. Let's see here. I need more text. This is where it'll be interesting to see if this works or not. We're going to do some weird anchory things. Just to get it started. There we go. Huh? Whatever. I don't understand this line in the middle. What is going on here? It's like the text is somehow both... Oh. There's our problem. Okay. We're going to center it in both ways. Physical. And I'm not going to use the other font that I've been using up until now. What we're going to do is we're going to see just how large we can make this. Okay, that's a little too large. And honestly, I don't know if this is going to work because this seems like it's going to be a little too hard to see behind all the other text and things that's going on. So, like, if I do something like this, where it's kind of sitting in the background, it's interesting looking, and I'm not sure it just does what I want it to. If I had something that fit it a little better, maybe. Steam sale starts on the 22nd. This is not going to be in the Steam sale. What I'm talking about is a set of game assets that lives in the Unity store. And I think right now they're like 110 total. All the pieces put together. It's like terrain and decorators and other things that go with it. So it's not bad. I've definitely paid for more, but it's a large enough expense that I kind of sit here and go, well, let's not just blindly dive into it. See, that actually looks a bit better with it bolded. But it still is just, it's lacking something, and I can't quite tell you what. Part of me wonders if there's a better way to attach it, to do something like, I don't know, because it just looks, it's too covered up. It's too difficult to see. And even if I mess with colors, I have a bad feeling that it's still not going to be terribly visible. Yeah, even in messing with colors, if I get it to be a color that stands out slightly, it's still not quite enough. I'd either need more white space in here, or I'd need to offset it slightly. I wonder if it would help to make it larger, for the ones that I can make larger. Kind of. It kind of helps. It makes it more readable, right? We're getting to this point very quickly where, like, if it takes up the whole thing like that, that helps. The problem is the word physical is so long that it actually stops me from expanding it or stretching it upwards in any crazy way. Hmm. Oh well. Something to keep in mind, but I don't think it's going to be something I continue to mess with. I think I need to find a better solution, honestly. Um, that or find it like custom image that I put in place there, because it just makes all this really hard to read as well. That's the part that's getting me, is how difficult it currently is to read the other stats on top of this. Even if I say the color should be teal and do that, it helps, but it only helps so much. Physical, mental, social. Physical. I'm trying to think if there's like a different word I could use. Nothing shorter though. Natural, real, substantial, environmental. Not really. Um, yeah, no, I'm not seeing any good synonyms at the moment. I'll have to think about that some more. Whatever. Moving on. Um, I'm going to quickly go through and just mark out a bunch of the object names. Also going to copy and paste some stuff just to make sure that... whoops. There's our gender label. There's our class label. Fleshy as a synonym. I could see it. I think an image would be better, or a different color for the background, although you had to use that color everywhere else then when you refer to that stat group. Yeah, and that's kind of why I'm not dedicating to it quite yet. There's our stats label, strength label. Well, we'll have to figure out a better way to do this. I want this to be very clear for the player. You have 3 sets of stats. Each set of stats is a strength, a manipulation of that ability, and then a resistance. So essentially you have your raw power in that stat. So strength is your raw physical, how how buff is your bro, essentially, is what strength is. Versus coordination is how well can you use what strength you have, or how well can you manipulate your physical form. Think of something like a contortionist as having an incredibly high coordination. Versus endurance is your ability to essentially take the abuse of everyday adventuring. And that's kind of what I'm going for here, because we have that for physical, and then mental has its 3, and then social has its 3. Can always do the Dark Souls way. Oh, I don't know. So the Dark Souls thing, if you look at this, and I'm going to blow it up a little bit, make it a little ugly, but make my point. This is just a bunch of numbers on a page, and as much as I enjoy numbers on a page, I want to have some way to explain things. And yeah, that's something Dark Souls doesn't do, is it doesn't explain things. It doesn't hold your hand in any way, shape, or form. I want to do that a little bit. I want to make this a little more accessible. Dark Souls is kind of made with the intent that it's going to kick your teeth in, and it's going to happily do it a bunch of times. And here I want to not babysit the player, but I don't want to handhold them either through a lot of, I don't want to babysit them, but I don't want to completely like throw them into the pit and just be like, have fun. After 20 hours of playing, yeah, it's perfectly clear. But in the meantime, and especially during something like character creation, where this is a character you are going to be stuck with for the rest of your gameplay experience, I want you to feel like you've made the character you want to play, as opposed to getting 4 or 5 levels in and going, oh, that's what that means. shit, I have to start over, or oh, now this character isn't going to be what I want them to be. Dark Souls, each time you level up, you can shift stats and do things a certain way. Here, a certain amount of those stats are set from the beginning. And when you set them in the beginning, there's a lot of playtime between then and when you would realize this is or isn't a character I want to play. So I want to take care of the player in that respect. And I should have been typing while I talk, because otherwise this would be done. But yeah, we want to take care of the player without bludgeoning them over the head with so much stuff. We're going to need a ton of buttons in a moment. And we're going to also need our first script for this whole thing. Since everything at this point is like completely non-interactable, we're going to need to start dumping down scripts and writing some actual code to get this sucker working. Okay. Alright, so just getting these out of the way. This is our mental stats, of which there is a mental label. And the mental label will contain these three suckers. Finally, our social. And I've started looking into systems that I like, and I've started deconstructing, specifically, I should say, conversational systems that I enjoy the use of. And one of the biggest things I've noticed is that some of my favorite conversational systems allow the player different options based on what's going on in the scene. So in the same way that Commander Shepard, when you're playing the Renegade or the Paragon path, it gives you those extra conversational points that you might not otherwise have. I'm interested in making social stats kind of, some of this would come from your social stats. So when you talk to an NPC, what you can say is going to be based on that stat. So if you're really charismatic, you could use your silver tongue and talk yourself out of a situation that might have resolved in a fight otherwise. Or you might be able to take care of, some enemies or a conflict that would otherwise have ended very differently. And I really like that idea that it not only does that, but it also just gives you more options. So having somebody in the party whose social stats are high would actually be a pretty big benefit, especially since when you look at it and you say, well, I could have somebody who's good at combat, or I could have somebody who's good at social skills. Because with only 4 characters, you have to start making decisions about what you want to focus on. If you have a character who's high in allure, you might not have a ton of extra options, but you may find that people are a lot more amenable to the crazy things that you suggest. Versus if you have somebody with a high charisma, it might be harder to talk them into things, but you'll have more options and more ways to go about talking them into what you want to do, so that they are more likely still to do whatever you want. Alright, canvas. Let's get some actual input fields here, because now we're getting to that point where I want input fields, damn it. Let's see. So we have this placeholder text, and I'm just going to very quickly content type standard, line type single line. Interesting. I wonder what content type name does. This input field and enforces capitalization. Honestly, I'm not too terribly excited about that. Given our other choices here, okay, standard allows all input. Don't really care about autocorrecting because autocorrecting names would be incredibly frustrating. So let's not. We're not doing numbers, so we don't care about that. Name, maybe. If only because I think name would not allow numbers. Although I guess you could have numbers in your name if you really wanted to. Password, PIN, also let's just go with standard for now. Let's just keep the player's options open. Character limit, I do want a character limit for now. Right now I'm going to say it's 22 characters in your character name. Yeah, that's most of that text box, and that's a pretty long name, honestly. If you're filling up most of that text box, it does definitely make me wonder what in the heck you're up to in terms of name selection. That should be good enough for now. That should be all I need. So, okay, one down. Bam, character name. So we've got character name. Gender, I'm going to hold off for the moment. I'm going to keep holding off on this until I figure out just how in heck I think I am going to go about this. Because that's one of those things where I want to do that right. I know I've seen a lot of games where they just simplify it, just say, male, female. And I want to do that right because that's something you just don't see terribly often. Whether it's actually going in and like doing the by race gender orientation, so that you've got like lizard people are all, they're not asexual, they're just, what's the term, I'm not remembering it, but essentially you'd have like all lizard people could all create and fertilize eggs. There's no gender among them. There's just one type of people. And that adds a little bit, just a little bit of lore to the world without me having to say anything. And that's something I can definitely appreciate every time I've seen it in other games, which is incredibly rare. But I always appreciate having that little bit of lore or that little bit of extra information cropping up. There we go. Just fixing up some of the stuff inside this text box, getting the name to fit and getting the font fixed up. I wanted a larger font in there so it's a little easier to read. That looks better. Yeah, nice and centered. Good, good. All right, so we've got name, which is not 1, 2, 3, 4 by default. Gender, skipping that for now. Race, that should be a drop-down list. That is something we can take care of very easily thanks to Unity. Thanks to Unity being Unity. I don't know if I want it to take the whole bar, but having things look even is fine, so we'll just do that for now. Options, hey. Okay, crud, I need my design doc for this. That thing I don't edit terribly often, but probably should. I've also started marking out sound effects that I think I'd like in the future. Definitely something that I need to take care of so that I can just start like inserting all the sound effects as I go. So let's see, we've got humans, humans. Obviously, they're kind of like we're in every single game. Sylvan are kind of our elf offshoot. Always You always have an elf style. Sylvan is kind of my workaround on it, where they're a little Protoss, a little elf, and a little bit of a tribal sense is attached to that too. That's kind of what I was looking for initially. We have the War, which think of them as they're almost like stone golems or something, but they're people, obviously. They're taller, they're larger. They tend to have a very interesting faith and belief system. They're very much in the like religious sense. Kind of one of the more religious races that I had statted out. The East Mori. Lizard people, by all names and forms. Trying to think of they're kind of like the barbarians of this world. They're there because they're great at surviving, and they're not they're definitely not bad fighters in any way, shape, or form. They're just also not the most civilized of people. They tend to have a lot of ritual combat and such like that. Ghasts. Ghasts are an interesting one. Ghasts are essentially undead that still are cognitively functional. There's a lot that I want to do with Ghasts that could be really fun. Part of me wants to go the Elantris route and have them either heal incredibly slowly or only heal via magical means, but at the same time, they have some really, really cool benefits to being Ghasts as well. Kind of a great trade-off there would be let's see, what did I have for their trade-offs actually? They don't need sleep, so they don't have an energy that they can run out of. They don't regenerate health normally. They have a lot of extra health. Oh, and death is completely permanent for them. So the moment they're gone, they're gone. Bringing something dead back from the dead is kind of like a no-no in this world. Undead on their own are already kind of a terrifying prospect, so people are not exactly out to create more undead. Especially with entire civilizations of ghasts floating around. See, I put thought into this, I promise. Gender, race, class. Okay, let's race drop down, cool. Class drop down, and let's just tie that in here. Obviously, human is not a class. I need to dump all my classes into here. Wow, I have a lot of text files floating around with information in them. Alright, thug. I like thugs. I'm just gonna... There we go, that should help. There we go, now I can see chat and my information at the same time. Guardsman. Beggar. Messenger. Barber. Surgeon. Hunter. And for the most part, these are classes that don't represent their current state. Currently, I'm thinking about making it represent what they last did before they started adventuring. Once they start adventuring, the class is going to change slightly. It's going to be a name based on the skills and stats that they currently own. So, yes, you'll start a thug, and thug will have certain pluses and minuses attached to it, but the thing to keep in mind is that as you say, put points into something like a... let's say you want to make a tank, so you start with thug, and you add a ton of endurance, and you start putting in shield skill, and you start putting in a bunch of basic swordsman skills, they might become a different class altogether. Where instead of being thug, they'll still have the thug archetype at the bottom of everything, but we'll still start to call it differently. Instead of being a thug, somebody who has all those tanking qualities might become a bruiser instead, or they might become a bodyguard with all the endurance stats. Versus if they went strength, they'd go from thug to bruiser. Versus if you for some reason started to go like intelligence and reasoning, knowledge and reasoning, they might become a swindler. So you can kind of see how the stats start to affect things like that. Because I honestly want a lot of this system to be initiate. There we go. I want a lot of the system to be reactive to how the player plays. So as you do things, as you change names, the game needs to react. Otherwise, I'm just not doing something right. Initiate, farmer, tinkerer, alchemist. Let's see. After alchemist is bard. And also one more thing to keep in mind. As I type these in and fill them out, is that there's multiple of these for each stat. So if you think of, okay, we've got thug, who is a primarily strength. We've got guardsman, who's going to be kind of an even on all the physical stats. We've got a beggar, who's more endurance-based than anything else. We've also got a messenger, who is also endurance-based, but he's going to have more coordination and charisma, while the beggar has more resolve and reasoning. The barber surgeon is going to be coordination based and also have knowledge and charisma because he tends to talk to people and because he tends to hear things. That makes him a great character for if you want to have, say, a thief that can do the silver-tongued aspect. So there are a lot of good places to start. And I want to look at my character classes real quick. Okay, I called it Harlot, because I have whore written here in my in my document, and I'm not sure I want to do that specific name. Noble and con artist. Great. That looks like it takes care of everything. There's a label, there's an arrow, and then a template. Okay, cool. So we've got name, gender, class. All the stats are going to be a big thing for us to take care of. And we're going to need minimums for every one of these two. So that's going to be a bit of a pain in the ass, but we can get this done hopefully pretty quickly with some copy and paste. At least to put the elements in place, the copy and paste is going to be pretty in depth. There we go. Centering everything, making sure it all plays nice. Also, because we need buttons on each side of these, let's just shift that over here. Here we go. Cool. Alright, so we've got all the stats. We obviously need to name them correctly. Otherwise, well, we'll look a little silly when the game crashes and we're wondering why, and they're all named Strength. And guys, if you have any questions, I know this is not the most action-packed of segments I've done, but this is just something that needed to happen. It's definitely on the list of lots of UI, but then again, a lot of this game is going to be that way to some degree. At least a lot of the gameplay that we're getting to at this point is all going to be a lot of UI stuff, a lot of control to make sure. Really? Oh. It's going to be a lot of controlling situations using UI. So we just have to keep that in mind. There we go. Okay, so we've got our stats attached to each of these. We now need buttons, and lots of them. I'm actually going to go so far as to create the buttons in the same setup as everything else I've got so far. Okay, you're 32 tall. The button is now 32 tall. Great. Also, button, your text is minus. I guess I should probably grab the entire button instead of just part of it. There we go. Put this all online with the rest of the stuff. We're just going to get this piece over here. Swap that minus out for a plus. And then wash, rinse, repeat for a lot of these. Let's see if we can take care of the text and other silly things in here while we're kind of looking at it and thinking of it. I'm honestly kind of tempted to keep the minus in Arial, if only because, actually even the plus too. Because as much as I like having my own font, I also like being able to read what's going on in here, and this looks a little funny, the way it currently is. We're getting there. Alright, you and you, come with me. You want to be functional. Okay, and now, all the buttons, we do that for the mental stats, and we do it for the social stats. I'm trying to line these up the best I can. Obviously, got a little learning to do in that department, but that's fine. That looks pretty well lined up. I can always come back and do a polish pass on it later. Nice. Okay, plus and minus buttons for everybody. Also, we need a remaining points counter somewhere. Let's see, stats. Also, I can't help but notice that some of these were kind of piled on top of one another. Get that. Don't you think relative values would be better than absolute ones for the UI coordinates and sizes? I mean, a lot of this is going to have to be fluid anyway for people who have different resolutions, so I'm not too worried about handling a lot of this stuff. Also, when you do use the hierarchy, everything does become relative, so I'm actually using relative coordinates for the most part. There are some cases like right now where it's like, oh, okay, some of these are not so relative. But aside from that, it's not actually all that bad. Okay, physical, mental, social, cool. I'm almost tempted to shift them somewhere so that I have room for one more piece of information. And that piece of information is a pretty important one. That is the number of points remaining that you can assign. Because obviously, if you can't assign any more points, we need to be able to handle that situation. When you click plus, obviously nothing can happen. So that's more text that we need to handle. Let's see here. So we want a label. And then we want another label that is the actual number of remaining points. And this number should probably be left aligned just to take care of that. Just so it always looks like we're trying to get things all lined up and pretty. I'm just going to shift some stuff around to make sure that this is all copacetic. That looks pretty good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Obviously, once you set your stats, we're going to have to dive into skills. Skills are going to be something that are a complete pain in the ass. Because the skills will change based on the class you pick. Some skills and some classes, they just don't get along well. For example, if you pick Thug, you're probably not going to get spellcasting as a starting skill. Just saying. Alright, well, this is a good point to take a break. We've got all the UI in place. The next step is to actually go so far as to start getting it to be interactable in more than a just, hey, look, I can type words in it kind of way. So, thank you guys for joining me. If you haven't done it yet, I can only encourage you to hit that follow button down below. I will be back tomorrow for a nice final Friday stream before the weekend. Woo, weekend. And at that point, we'll probably dump a little more functionality into this, make this something usable, and figure out what our save structure is going to look like for the characters so that we can save and load it fairly easily and not have to futz with anything aside from like maybe a JSON file format. Honestly, I think that would be the best one we can do. So, thank you again, guys, for joining me. It's been great. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Take care.